Hello, everybody. We're back, the three of us, for the first time in I don't remember how long it's been since the last thing we talked about, but
Probably months, a very long
a
time.
number of months. And we're here to talk about the Batman and Peacemaker, but mostly the Batman.
Definitely mostly
Mhm. And it's pretty fortuitous how this all worked out because as of now, Brianna has seen this movie twice. I've seen it three times, and Malik, I believe you've just seen it four times, correct?
This is true.
So this is going to be like a really interesting discussion, I think. And we're going to give like a healthy amount of discussion, I hope, to Peacemaker where we can fit that in. But the Batman is the hot topic, and it's the thing I think all of us have the most to say about. And Malik very helpfully has laid out a structure for us to approach this with. So I don't know who wants to go first in terms of talking about expectations we had for this movie and just general impressions walking out. I guess both seeing it for the first time and where we're at with it now.
I will happily go first.
Nice.
So it's so funny how this project came together because originally the Batman was supposed to be a Ben Affleck solo film with Deathstroke as the main villain. He was gonna star he was gonna star in and direct that film. And then he was like, you know what, I can't do this. Someone else should direct it. And he's like, you know what, I don't even want to be Batman anymore. So after the Flash, like, whatever. And then Matt Reeves got a hold of the project, cast Robert Pattinson as Batman, and the rest is history. We saw that first trailer, and well, first of all, just I'm a big fan of Matt Reeves' filmography in general, from Cloverfield to Let Me In to those last two stunning Planet of the Apes films that he did. So I was really excited to see what he would bring to this, and I I've seen Robert Pattinson outside of Twilight, so I knew he was a good actor. And the entire cast all around, I was just excited about. From Colin Farrell, I'm a big Colin Farrell fan. I like Zoe Kravitz and everything I've seen her in. So, Paul Dano was a new one for me. I'd never seen him in anything before, to my knowledge. But he's, I really liked the dark take they were doing on the Riddler. I liked that they were doing the Riddler again, period, just because it had been such a long time since we had Jim Carrey, and this was a much darker Zodiac-esque serial killer take, and they killed it as far as the marketing went. So I was very, very excited for this movie. I hadn't been this excited for a film since Avengers Endgame. And then I saw the movie, and it definitely lived up to those expectations. I would not call it a masterpiece, and when we get to negatives, I will get into why. But overall, I adore this movie. I think it's pretty close to to perfect. I mean, it's great. Not flawless by any means, but it is wonderful. I love the atmosphere. I love the actors. I love the story. That there's very little in this movie to not like, as far as I'm concerned. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, the best thing I think I can say in this movie's favor is that it's so close to perfect that the flaws that it does have stand out all the more because they're surrounded by stuff that's so gold. I am someone who, like Malik, was sort of tracking the development of this movie back when it was supposed to be an Affleck vehicle. And it's kind of hilarious to me that this movie coming out in the form that it is kind of like our full circle closing the book on the era of like the fallout of Batman v Superman. Like all of that led us to here. And as far as the marketing went, I feel like I got my fill of what this movie was selling based just on that first teaser. I'd heard people talk about like trailers after that being too like potentially spoilery or just giving away too much or showing too much. And I'm like, they sold me. They sold me in 2020 when that first teaser dropped. And that was really the only piece of marketing for this movie that I bothered to watch for 2 years.
That was in 20.
Yep, and I do not regret that. Uh, this movie is just freaking amazing. I'm just beyond impressed with it. Uh, it's it does. I mentioned this in my own review that people can obviously go watch on my channel, but it does that thing where I was a little bit having some reservations about certain things. Like, okay, I trust Matt Reeves to the end of the earth, but is this really the style and the tone that I want from Batman? And it just, watching the movie, those things were never a problem. Like, doing such a grounded, horrifying take on Riddler, not a villain you would typically think to do that with, and yet this movie makes it feel like the most natural thing. I just, yeah, like we're gonna dedicate like a section to issues, and I do have issues, but they're such small peanuts in the face of the experience of watching this thing.
So where you at with it, Bryanna?
So, as per usual, I was the one who went into this with just expecting nothing. I saw the trailer, was excited about it. It was great, and I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm excited for this movie." But I had honestly no thoughts. Walking out of it the first and then the second time, I will say that the same as you guys, I have a few, minor grievances here or there, but they're so small in comparison to what I like about the movie that they hardly even matter. I wouldn't go so far as to call the movie a masterpiece or anything like that, but I will say with absolute certainty, the people who worked on this film were all masters in their craft. The people who did the costume, the sound design, the settings, the people who
There's a lot of ruffling in the
Like,
background.
oh yeah, that's Phoenix walking around. But yeah, that's my take on it. Fantastic. Everyone who had a hand in it was just 10 out of 10. Amazing.
So, do you want to open with the small negatives section?
Danny Longlegs. It strikes me as really bizarre that Batman is able to continue to work with the policeman after assaulting Gordon in the middle of a precinct.
That is right.
Well, that's called white privilege. It's the reason why Batman doesn't cover his entire face and shows this much, just to let you know I'm still on y'all's team. Don't shoot me, because I promise you, had T'Challa done that, they'd have shot his ass.
Yeah, sure. So I only have two actual negatives. Well, 2.5. So the first one I think is pretty substantial. The really great scene between Batman and Gordon in the precinct. Batman socks him, runs away from the cops. They all fire on him and try to kill him. Corrupt or not, literally every cop in that building is trying to kill Batman. It was to my understanding that he had burned his bridge with the cops. Like, there was no, I can hang out at crime scenes and be awkward and help them investigate after I just assaulted a cop in the middle of a precinct and they all tried to murder him for it. And then the very next night, once he takes out Falcone out of the Iceberg Lounge to get arrested, they're all just standing there. It's fine, hunky-dory. We still don't want to kill or arrest Batman for reasons. And then we let him investigate Riddler's hideout for reasons. Like that never happened. Like you guys didn't just try to kill him the last night. So that doesn't make any sense to me. That I found that plot hole pretty glaring as I rewatched the movie. And then the other issue, kind of related to that scene, we get this line from Gordon where he's like, I guess we don't all work for you. And I'm like, I don't buy that, given the nature of the story. Like I don't buy that that's even true. And it plays like Falcone is the centerpiece of all the corruption in the city, but not enough to actually matter. Like when Gordon said that, I was like, you don't actually believe that, right? Like after all the people that you found out are in positions of power that are corrupt, what do you think is going to happen to this man once you arrest him? Like, you got to know he's just going to get out of jail the next day. So I found that line kind of strange. And then the other issue, well, this isn't even really an issue for me, but I see where a lot of people are coming from with this. So this Alfred, right? I really like Andy Serkis in the role. He's not in the movie a ton. But I think even more kind of glaring and slightly problematic. Like, again, not so much for me because I am who I am, but for a lot of people, specifically people who aren't like hard locked into the mythos of Batman and aren't Batman fans, like the three of us, a lot of them, and I can understand this criticism, don't really buy into the Bruce and Alfred dynamic as it is presented in this movie. Because, and I really like this rendition of Bruce, but because he is so traumatized and angst-ridden and kind of angry all the time, it doesn't lend for any real genuine tender scenes between them until their last scene together in the movie. And by that point, it's hard to even, at least for a lot of the people who aren't like hardcore Batman fans and coming into this cold, it's hard for them to even buy into the notion that this Bruce even cares about Alfred, because he hasn't had a moment of not being a prick to him for really the entire movie. Like, he's like, you're not my father, I don't want your cufflinks, like all this. He's being a really kind of bratty child with Alfred for a lot of this film, and they don't have a tender scene at all until that moment in the hospital. And I can see why that rubbed people the wrong way, especially because we do kind of a death fake out with him, which the more I watch it, the more that's kind of, it's the weird inverse of what we were doing with Ant-Man No Way Home, where that movie has to work overtime to justify her death. In this movie, like, I knew the second I saw it, I'm like, we're not killing Alfred in this scene. He's barely even in this movie. And they haven't really done the legwork to invest you emotionally in the dynamic between this Bruce and Alfred, so it does nothing to kill him. That whole thing plays as kind of but Robert Pattinson and Andy Serkis, their performances are strong enough to hold that together for me. But I can understand why the Alfred stuff does not work for a lot of people with this film.
Gee, now you got me in sort of a weird place, because I do have an issue with how Alfred is handled.
Just not that one.
Yeah, like it relates to what you're talking about, but like I have a totally opposite read on what specifically you're describing, and like it would make sense to talk about that now, but I don't want to. I'd save it for the. I guess the shortest way to put it is that I think all of the stuff you're talking about with like the tension in Bruce and Alfred's relationship and them not really having any more moments until that scene, I think that's actually really good, and it's like it informs the heart of Bruce's character journey through this whole movie, which is that he refuses to let anyone in, like anyone at all. And it didn't come off as like bratty to me. It came off as Bruce obviously does care about Alfred, and he's refusing to let himself. Like, I'd like deep down, he cares about this guy, because how could he not? But he's just repressing it and burying it. And this whole movie is about Bruce dehumanizing himself and burying any humanity that's in himself. So I found letting their first moment of like human connection be so late into the story to be really cathartic and really earned. My issue is then that's Alfred's last scene in the film, where Bryanna doesn't have this, but
I also don't have a problem with how Bruce and Alfred's relationship goes up until that point. I'm not one of those people, only because one, I am familiar with Bruce and Alfred's dynamic anyway, so I guess I'm one of the lucky ones, but also just because it makes perfect sense that this version of Bruce Wayne cannot be nice to this man. He is the living reminder of everything that he lost. They are both that same person for each other. Bruce reminds Alfred of whatever happened all those years ago, and Alfred reminds Bruce of what he used to have. So there's always going to be this horrible tension between them because neither one of them can leave really, but they don't know where they stand with each other either. And by the time we get to the point where Bruce is ready to like be open to Alfred, I love that it's not out of the blue at all, but I love that it's so just they took it slow. They didn't hit really hard with it and make it seem like, oh, you're my dad now.
It's
like,
very
no.
tentative.
Yes, because that's exactly where we're at. This is the beginning of Bruce Wayne, and for that matter, this is the beginning of Bruce and Alfred. There was Bruce or Alfred before that moment. After that, you get Bruce and Alfred, just the very, very beginning moments of that, and I think it's very nice.
But yeah, my negative with that is that I would have had some moment, some quick little flash to Alfred later on in the movie. Like, it always sticks out to me, having seen the movie 3 times, each viewing, I'm like, it's so weird that we basically have, like, the epilogue montage that we do with these kind of movies, and Alfred's just nowhere. Like, he's in the hospital, they have that conversation, it's a really heartwarming moment, and then Alfred is out of the movie completely. Like, that just strikes me as kind of weird. As for my other negatives, I have, if that's my half, then I have 2.5 also. One of them being the exact same thing you spoke to, Malik, of the scene with the cops as they're arresting Falcone. I'm less bothered by the plot hole aspect of it, although you're absolutely right. It just does not track that there would be no animosity toward Batman from the cops as he's like walking out of that building. I guess we can assume that Gordon smoothed things over off screen and they figured that just wasn't important enough to show, and like...
Yeah, I don't buy that at all.
I feel like at that point they're just worried about, like, they have bigger fish to fry.
I guess?
Like,
I mean, they just tried
by
to,
the time they
the
capture
entire
the-
police force tried to murder him.
Yeah, like we've laughed to ourselves multiple times at like the Keystone Cop, like the fact that they're all just barreling after him in
Yes.
this building, and like that's...
I don't think that's unreasonable, mostly because they all distrust him, and that distrust in that city breeds hatred. They
Yeah,
do
no,
not
that's
like him.
that's not unreasonable at
By
all.
the
What's
time we get
unreasonable?
to that point, they still don't like him. But like, you've got the Riddler in cuffs, the guy who's been...
That hasn't happened yet.
Where are we?
We're at them taking Falcone out of his building, and all of the cops are lined up there, and they just have nothing to say or do about the fact that Batman's present.
Bro, if I had Falcone in chains, I would not be worried about the guy in the bat suit. Falcone? The guy who's been running the city for 20 plus years, not that they know that, but they might have an inkling based on whatever Jim's told them. I would not be worried about the guy in the bat suit. He's gonna run around doing whatever anyway. One man in chains that we've been trying to get in chains for this long is good enough.
I mean, there's nothing stopping them from arresting both of them.
Yeah,
They're both there.
He's gonna fight them. He's not
Like,
just gonna go.
I'm
They could try to arrest him, but what's the point? They could lose Falcone in the struggle. Like, what? I
If
would
you
just
wanted-
put him in a car and drive him off. Done.
if you wanted to rationalize the plot of it, I think you easily could. What really bothers me is on a thematic level, it feels, pardon the pun, like a cop-out, where this movie has a very interesting relationship with its politics, and I'm going to talk about that a lot in the positive section.
White privilege.
Yeah. Oh boy, I that is for sure going to come up because people won't shut up about it. But
Oh, will they not?
that we'll get to it. But when it comes to its handling of like Batman's relationship with the police, I like what it seems like it's trying to do, but I just feel kind of icky when a movie says that the police force from the ground up is corrupt, like they're in the mob's pocket, and then the way that we basically tie off that thread is, no, it turns out, like Malik said, that corruption doesn't really go deep enough to mean anything. And part of
think that's what that means.
part of that is me reading into the way that scene is presented.
Yeah, because we just have like almost like we have at least 2 to 3 dozen cops just standing there, and then Gordon's like, "I guess we don't all work for you."
And like the shot is very triumphant, the music is very triumphant, And Bryanna, it's totally fair that you're not the only one who doesn't read what I read into it, but when I see that scene, what the movie is communicating to me is this sort of softball message of like, now that we've got Falcone, the police as an institution are fine, and we weeded out the bad apples, and all of the good cops are here to like be not a systemic problem. This movie sets itself up to be like, this is a systemic problem, and then our last note on that thread is, no, we got the bad guy, and now the cops are good again. And that bothers me.
Okay, alright. You know what? I do not have that at all. I would go as far to say is that that's not what should have been read into that interaction. And the only reason I say that is because the Gotham that we have in this movie, all the world building we do up until that point, very, very, all the talk about choices and who has them and who doesn't, and who manipulates who and for what reason, would very easily lead you to believe that, first of all, whoever showed up really was sticking their neck out, because provided Falcone didn't die, you're right, he could have gotten out the following day, and then what? He could very easily get your name, your family's names, you'd be in deep trouble. I don't think what they mean is that, oh, like all the good police officers showed up and now it's fine. What I think they mean is that there's a shred of hope here. There is a single line of defense against a rising tide of darkness. Falcone has his people and they go real high up, but there are, in fact, some people like Jim still willing to do the right thing. It's just this little note of hopefulness.
I think
so what you're saying is,
I think it's maybe just the sheer number of them.
There's a lot.
That makes
it's at least half the precinct is there.
Yeah, like that's
of one precinct. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there's just too many people in that scene to be like, this is a little shred of hope. It really reads to me like, no, the GCPD its systemic issues are not nearly.
If I have to imagine, and the movie takes pains to do this, if I have to imagine Gotham City as New York City, the amount of people that would make up half of one precinct is not going to be even a dent in the system. That really reads to me like, if we're really taking this at face value, this city is what we're led to believe it's supposed to be based on what it looks like in this movie, that's like a handful. It's a lot on screen, and it is a very overly triumphant moment, but I have no problem with that because it doesn't detract from the world that we've set up so far. It really fits in well for me.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
When I think back to the previous scene of Gordon being like, we gotta get you out of here, and then I think back to that, it's like Gordon at that point in the story was well aware that a good bit of the police force was corrupt and didn't know who to trust in that moment, and so he needs Batman out of there because he can't trust anyone else in that building.
The only problem I have with it,
go from that to, I guess we don't all work for you, literally over the course of one day, like only one day has passed, and he and Batman haven't done anything to change the system. They've just, peeled the curtain back as far as corruption goes. It reads as weirdly, like Nick said, just kind of weird, contradictory messaging.
Yeah,
it's the first step forward. Bryanna, it's what the politician is talking about. Like, we're taking steps now, the very beginning of steps to learn how to trust each other. And the only problem I have is that I didn't think of it until right now. I don't know either how Jim knew who to call, like who to trust, because he couldn't trust anyone in that precinct. You're right. And I don't know how he figured that out, but I still think it's plausible.
If we'd gotten a scene of Jim maybe like rallying people and like getting to be there in the moment as they make, like you say, the choice to do the right thing, that would maybe alleviate the issue for me.
Or if there would have been one or two cops over the course of the movie that were like, hey Jim, you're doing the right thing. Like, I think the Batman has some good ideas. Every single other police officer besides Jim Gordon is like, wow, you freak, get out of here.
You know what? I think that's
insane.
I think that's it. And I do want to talk about my other negative before we move on, because we've been on this for a little while. But what you're getting at, I think, is really this is the one issue with the movie being so locked into Bruce's POV. Because we were talking on the way home, about how like you could count on one hand the amount of scenes in this movie that aren't following Bruce directly, and none of them are Gordon or the cops. If we'd gotten a scene that was like, yeah, Gordon choosing like independent of Bruce, or Bruce is not on screen, like discussing these kind of things with other cops, that would be something. But we don't broaden the scope of the movie's point of view enough to do that. And I think the real problem underlying like Malik and I's feeling about it is just that given that we only ever see the cops from Bruce's perspective, outside of Gordon, they all feel like
Very antagonistic.
not just antagonistic, they all feel like of one mind. Like when you hear that the cops in Gotham are corrupt, you take that with also
All the cops.
they all seem like they've just been one united force this entire time. So when you hear that the cops are corrupt, you're like, well, yeah, it makes sense that it would be all of them. They all act in tandem in every scene that we see them in. Gordon
wish
is
we would have had
always
more
the
variety.
singular exception.
I wish we would have had more people, even if it was only one or two, that would have definitely been to the movie's credit, that were just like helping Jim on the side. Everyone's like, oh, are you going to stick your neck out for this man? I wish somebody would have like tapped that guy on the arm and
Like,
just been
give
like,
him a
you know,
break.
give him a break. Let it go. Let it go.
Yeah, it's way too many scenes of the cops basically being a swarm with one opinion.
That I can concede the point on. Still doesn't bother me in the end because the world building carries it for me. Like it holds up. However, that is a valid critique. I agree.
And my only other problem, and I hesitate to even really call it a problem, it's just kind of a weird thing, is that with each viewing, I've successively been more and more like, I like Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson's chemistry. The two of them have chemistry for days. Like, the sexual tension is dripping off the screen.
Wild. Absolutely wild. Like, wow, you guys.
But
Just like his sweat behind the scenes.
No, once again, I get to say, and I haven't said this in so long, Bruce Wayne, you dog. I missed saying that.
But take the chemistry of the actors out of it, there's not really anything in the writing of the movie that makes me root for or be like really invested in them as a romantic pairing.
I love the concept of them as a fling. I absolutely think it is 155% accurate for them to like make out a little, have this weird tension in the scope of this movie only, and then Selena leaves. Like, this makes the absolute utmost sense to me. If they tried to like put them together and fashion some sort of lasting relationship, I would have been like, no, not these two people, not right now. But like the fact that they have that, like, not even the tension between the actors, because that's absolute top tier. Like I could see them having a fling, just Batman, Catwoman. Like, they do that really, really well, and I feel like the text of the movie lends to that.
Yeah, I like them as compliments, and I don't know.
You could have also taken it out and you wouldn't have lost anything, but like I said before, adding the romance informs Bruce's character for me, which I will talk about later.
Yeah, I don't think...
that's our next topic of discussion, Robert Pattinson in the role of Batman.
Yeah, so let's move on to that. He is... I've never been in the camp that's been like doubting of his abilities as Batman. Like, by the time that he got announced, he'd already been in more than enough things to where I'm like, yeah, the Twilight stigma is off this guy. He's just a great actor. And even in Twilight, he's doing the best with that material that I think you could ask of anybody. So the idea that the Twilight movie should be like held against his acting ability has never resonated with me.
That's just ignorance.
Yeah. And that said, Eden actually came out of this movie saying that this is her favorite Pattinson role, and I'm like, you know what? I can't argue you on that. He's just... And it's so interesting because an issue that like we've had and that some people we follow have had with previous Batmans has been sometimes they get too monosyllabic. Like Michael Keaton's Batman was like, that is a Batman that only works because of Keaton's performance, and on paper there's not really anything to that character. This is not a monosyllabic Batman, but a very reserved, very cold, calculated Batman. His face is kind of stuck in one expression for 99% of the movie, and yet Pattinson manages to still make that feel human, and you see all of the layers coming through in his performance, and it's just on the page and just Pattinson elevating what's there. It's all so good.
You can feel the soul and intention and the wheels turning in his eyes in every single scene.
Yeah, there's the particular moment when after Alfred has been blown up, and I do want to talk about why I like that plot point for Bruce's character, but after it happens and the doctor is like, is there anyone else who can contact any next of kin? And he just says, no, it's just me. He gives this little twitch, like right before it cuts, and it's like him wincing in pain at having to say that, like it's just me left. For the purposes of Bruce Wayne, the character, because I have already seen the argument that like it's just Pattinson's performance, and that like someone who I usually agree with on things, I had a discussion with them about this movie. They said that they found Bruce to be a hollow shell throughout this movie, and I'm like, are you nuts? Did we watch the same film? And a big part of that is how much Pattinson's performance is dedicated to the repression, like I mentioned. And when we blow up Alfred, I don't need there to be like the stakes of, oh, we might actually kill Alfred, because to me that's not what's at all important. What's at all important is that Bruce, for even a second, thinks Alfred might be dead. Whether the audience buys into that, completely immaterial. All that matters is that Bruce needs that like scare to like it takes something that extreme before he's even willing to extend the olive branch of admitting out loud that he cares about him. And that says so much about this Bruce, and it's this really, really tragic character, like Bryanna said, without like laying it on thick.
Yeah, there's not a ton of like overly expository dialogue. There's as much of that as I think needs to be with the intro and then the epilogue. I love how we do that, by the way, of him like writing in journals, because that's a big. These are comic book characters, and you have Batman and often with Spider-Man constantly narrating, and it could come off really cheesy to do that in film, but they did it pretty well here. But as far as his performance goes in the actual movie, I was completely floored by it. I think, like, a lot of people kept saying that this is a bad Bruce just because he's not doing the billionaire playboy thing of taking out models and driving a Maserati around and showboating. When I'm like, this isn't that Bruce. He's deeply traumatized. He's not interested in putting on the playboy persona, and
he's not interested in being Bruce Wayne. Like, Bruce Wayne might as well not exist as a distinct persona in this movie. And like that's his whole thing, because I'd totally buy it if by the next movie we get to a Bruce who's willing to, like, you know, interact with people and do the whole playboy shtick. But for this movie, with the story we're trying to tell, you just couldn't do that. That would be ridiculously out of place in this movie, because like our bookends, we start this movie with I am the shadows, like it's the fullest extreme of like the Batman Begins, where it's like I have to become an idea. This movie opens with a Batman who is an idea, a Bruce who is not a person, and
he's non-existent. He's living in the persona of Batman.
And the whole arc of this movie is getting to the end where he goes from a shadow, an idea, to a human being that other people can touch and forge some kind of connection to. So yeah, if we ever do like Bruce Wayne the public figure who has to act a certain way. That's gonna wait till next movie.
Yeah, I'm excited to see him naturally evolve to that place, but I'm glad we got something radically different for this movie that works. It absolutely works. And I what I think is so strong with this performance too is, as you said, the reservedness of it. The stuff he's not saying as much as the stuff he is saying. Like a lot of it is in the eyes. Like when he thinks Riddler might know who he is, the genuine fear and shock in his eyes is great.
Mm-hmm.
And him trying so hard to be reserved and hold back his fear in the interrogation scene as Riddler keeps whispering and taunting him with Bruce Wayne. Like it's really cool. That was also one of the best fake outs because the trailers, and I think you are right, kind of. As far as the marketing goes, I do think they showed maybe a little too much for most people. I mean, that stuff doesn't tend to bother me. Like if they show it in a trailer, it's not going to bother me once I see the finished film. But they kept doing this voiceover. It was like, "You're really not as smart as I thought you were, Bruce Wayne," and you're like, "Oh wow, somebody's going to figure out who Batman is."
Yeah,
And then you
glad-
watch the movie, and that's this really cool fake out.
Yeah, which we'll talk about more when we talk about Riddler. For now, Bryanna, scale of 1 to husband. How do we feel about this Bruce?
Husbando. I mean, like right below it, because like I would absolutely marry Val Kilmer. I would not marry this version of Bruce yet. He has got near limitless potential. He is very, very, very high up on the list of like potential husbandos. Like, give it one more movie of solid character development, a little more empathy. Like, let me see a smile that's not only halfway formed, and you got it, babe. You got it. Put a ring on it right there.
I guess then to move on to next subject of interest, that being the baddie herself, Selina Kyle.
Oh man, oh man.
I've not actually given much thought to where I would compare her to other Catwomen. I've kind of very consciously avoided comparing too many parts of this movie to other Batman things, but I can say I really like Kravitz's performance. Again, putting aside that I'm not super invested in the presentation, I guess I'll say, of this Bruce and this Selina as romantic prospects for each other. I think the way that they parallel each other outside of that is really, really interesting. And the fact that, like, part of Bruce's problem and his need to, like, shove his humanity down is what Selina voices when she's like, you assume the worst in people, which is something that we have in common. And that's also something that, like, applies to Riddler. But the thing is, for Bruce and Riddler, that's to varying degrees true. For Selina, from what we see, it's really not true at all. And it's like she and Bruce have the same facade, but it comes away much more easily with Selina. And it's not nearly as much of like an ironclad wall. It's just kind of, you get the sense that it's like a practiced cynicism that she has just from living in Gotham, but she's really full of empathy, and when push comes to shove, she's always like making the right decision. You never really doubt the morality of this Catwoman, which I think is an interesting choice given how gray we usually play her.
Yeah, so as far as the romance goes, just because of the nature of the story and what we're doing with this Batman doesn't really, I mean, it's okay, like it's solid and enjoyable, but like the best depiction of Catwoman and Batman as a romantic item for me is still the Telltale Batman games.
Yeah, that's fair. Which we are going to play eventually, I guess, because
What is that on?
I will find it. But yeah, because the people want their Batman.
I mean, I'd play that right now. We don't have it, but like I'd play that right now.
That's great because it's on my PS4 and I'm moving up to New Jersey soon.
Hey, Hey,
No.
hey, yo.
I'm still probably gonna get us a copy anyway, but still.
Oh, absolutely.
As far as Catwoman by herself goes, I would have liked us to do a little more delving into what's driving this Catwoman for a lot of the movie, which is Annika. It's very vague as to if she was the mayor's mistress or not, if she was even of age. Was he the one that's abusing her, and that's why she has a black eye? Like, there's so little we even know about this friend that she's invested so much of herself in, and I could have used a little more explaining as far as that goes. But outside of that, this was a pretty solid rendition of Catwoman. I thought Zoe Kravitz sold the physicality and fight scenes incredibly well.
Yeah, and I mean, granted, she only has like a couple of actual fight scenes. That's another thing with this movie. It's not
an action movie, yeah.
Yeah, it's really not. But the little bits of action that she does get, she sells really well. And I'm gonna save talking about her theme for when we actually talk about just the score in general. But I love her theme.
Me too.
And yeah, I don't know. I wish one day to meet a human being who I have even a fraction of her and Pattinson's chemistry with. It will melt my loins.
Yo, I don't know what I'd do. I don't even think I want that. I don't think I want to. Imagine I would not get anything done if I were actually with, like, dating my partner and we have that much chemistry. It'd be like Gomez and Morticia. We would have no jobs. We would just sleep together constantly. I don't have time. No, thank you. I love to see it on screen. Do not want it for myself.
Fair enough.
I have too many things to do.
Riddle me this.
My baby boy.
Yes, let's talk about the Riddler, because I think he's fascinating. In a lot of ways, he's like the linchpin for why this movie works so well for me. I was excited at the idea of Paul Dano being cast because I have seen him in a couple of things. He's the closest thing to an antagonist in There Will Be Blood, and that's a pretty old movie. That's like a very early performance from him. He absolutely kills it in that movie. And he's also in Where the Wild Things Are. He's a guy I've seen in a couple of things, and he's always like giving these kind of understated but very standout performances. And this is understated in a very different way, where like Riddler has a lot of over-the-top deliveries and mannerisms, but when you really look at his screen time and the sort of packaging of his performance, he's kind of got like some cards stacked against him. Most of his screen time is over the phone, like he doesn't actually have any of the other actors to bounce off of, except for the one scene in the prison, and he's got his entire face covered for so much screen time, and yet in spite of that, he's constantly conveying character, and he complements the other actors' performances really well. The thing that I always talk about, having seen it the first time, is like on rewatches, both Pattinson's and Dano's eye acting is like top tier, and just that's from the very first scene of the Riddler. Like when we see him just silently in the mayor's room, watching him pace around, and he just has this absolutely venomous glare of just like the mayor is the trashiest human being he's ever laid his eyes on. It's so good. And over the screen, when it's the DA who's doing the riddles and he's looking at Batman through the phone, the earnestness of his admiration for Batman, it comes through entirely in his eyes. And it's a great, like, that performance is the thing I love the most in terms of rewatch value, because once you know what his deal is and that he's basically viewing Batman as his collaborator through this entire movie and like his inspiration, that's so clear in all of his screen time prior to that moment. It makes you wonder, like, man, it really is obvious, and it's a clever way that this movie plays on like our perception of Batman's relationships with his villains, because so often, and I was mentioning this to Bryanna on the way home, it's like Batman and the Joker, or Batman and whoever, they have this rapport where the villain is like enamored with Batman, but it's in a like I love the way that we fight sense, and the movie banks on you assuming that that's what Riddler has, where he's like, oh, you're so impressive, or like, oh, you're so smart, and it feels like villain banter, but it's not. He thinks they're on the same team.
He's a child, and he had like he's a child stuck in an adult's body, and Batman is his childhood role model. Like the person he wished was around, enacting, I don't know, quote unquote change when
Vengeance.
he was a little orphan boy getting his fingers nibbled on by the rats.
And like, it's the layers that there are once you find out what his deal is and what his backstory is are so interesting, because obviously he freaks out when Bruce tells him like, what are you, crazy? We're not working together. And like the switch of like, why would you say that? Like you feel
He panicked. He was like, that is not how this was supposed to go. Like,
and
oh
he
man,
he
you had delusion.
he doesn't even realize it, but it's the childhood wound being reopened because it's something that he thought was promised to him by a Wayne, and it's taken away in like 5 seconds. And I have so many notes about him, but like the fact that like giving him that motivation and making it to where he, and later when we get the his followers like parroting Bruce's like I'm vengeance line back at him, was the perfect thing to do for Bruce's growth as a character, because it really shows if you dedicate yourself to becoming an idea, becoming a symbol, and
Anyone can parrot it.
anyone can parrot it, and it's also incredibly easy to be misinterpreted. If you stop being a person with an ideology and you become the ideology and you just become a like mythic figure, then people are going to confuse your meaning. And like part of Bruce realizing that he has to be more than just a symbol of vengeance is like, okay, vengeance for what? And at whom? And by what means? Because Riddler just saw what he was doing and built on it. He's like, every night he goes out and is vengeance, calls himself vengeance, lets people use that as a proper noun for him. And Riddler's like, okay, cool, let me do that. And that's where a lot of the interesting class commentary comes in, because Bruce is this upper class guy targeting underclass criminals. Riddler's the underclass guy targeting upper class criminals. And the only thing that separates them is that Riddler is willing to kill people. Like, that's it. That's the only way in which they are different. And when you have them in the prison together, and it's literally they're mirrors for each other, like their reflections are constantly at each other, so they're both always in the shot together. It's like, it's built up so well to be like something you're not thinking about, and then once Bruce realizes it, it's like this earth-shattering thing of like, how could I have been so stupid to not have realized that this is my fault?
And I love the short little moment that we get when they're at Riddler's apartment and they're looking through his little notebook, and he has his journal entry. It cuts for like 4 solid seconds while Gordon's reading to Bruce's face. It just zooms in on Bruce's face, and his eyes get like imperceptibly wider. He's just like, oh my god, oh shit, oh my god, this is me. This is literally me. This could have been me. Like, you can see the realization on his face while Gordon's reading this. It's like it hits uncomfortably close to home for them to both have the journal as like a means of keeping track of things, because they feel like they're going insane. Except the thing is, the Riddler's actually insane, and Bruce has one of those Edgar Allan Poe moments where you know that poem about the guy who kills the person and he buries him under the floorboards and stuff. He starts that poem off by saying, yes, I committed this murder. Let me explain to you. how and why I did it so that I can prove to you that I'm not crazy because I have logic. Bruce has this like weird moment of like, I go out and I fight criminals and I do all this other stuff, and it's like, is this justice? Like, what is this? What am I? And this is on the heels of you thought your father was a Boy Scout and like all this other stuff. Like Bruce going through it. But when we get to the moment with the notebook, you can just see it plain as day on his face, and I adore that we get that.
Another thing I really love about the Riddler in this movie is they really subvert expectations, not just with all the plot stuff that you guys have already acutely mentioned so well, but at the end, like there is no, and as you would expect from a lot of the comics, sure, but this is very bold for a movie to do, especially now. We don't even entertain a physical confrontation between them. There is no brawl between the Riddler and Batman.
Yeah, it feels like the reason that we have his face covered for so much of the movie and then have the goons at the end all wearing the same outfit is so that we can have our cake and eat it too on that front, where like there is no physical confrontation really with the individual that is the Riddler, but there is like this physical confrontation with people who look like how he's looked for so much of this movie. Like you see them and you think Riddler, and they like are his followers, they have his ideals, and it's a great way to make it so that Edward Nashton, the character, he doesn't have to be like a fighter for there to be a physical threat along with his ideological threat. And like Bryanna mentioned, him being an overgrown child, Bruce is an overgrown child in this movie, and I like one that we have it on screen for like 2 seconds, but the one like image we get of Riddler as a child, he is right next to Bruce Wayne. Like they are kids in the same sphere from the moment of their like conception as these people, basically. And Riddler doesn't realize this. Again, like the great irony of this character, that he perceives so much that Bruce doesn't perceive, but is also like imperceiving about things about himself. Bruce Wayne's origin story is Riddler's origin story, literally like down to the details, because Riddler assumes that Thomas Wayne was just as corrupt as everyone else, when the real problem is that all of the orphans, amongst which was Riddler, they got the short end of the stick, not because of anything Thomas Wayne did, but because Thomas Wayne died. And in the absence of Thomas Wayne, Falcone, Maroni, everyone goes after a piece of the renewal pie and leaves nothing for the orphans. So
leaves nothing for anyone else. I mean, the orphans first and foremost, but the people of like the city of Gotham as a whole suffered.
So Riddler's start of darkness, without him realizing it, really is the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne. Like the death of the Waynes creates Batman and the Riddler in the same instant, and neither of them is fully aware of that fact.
And I love the fact that like they have the same backstory except for one detail. So you know when like they're at the funeral and Bruce and the mayor, I'll just call her the mayor because she's running, she's gonna get it. Bruce and the mayor are sitting there and they see the little boy, like with his, I mean he still has his mother, but like they see the little boy, and it's like Bruce does have the same origin story, except he's in the public eye. He could never have become the Riddler because people were watching him. He's the city's prince. He's Bruce Wayne. Everyone was always constantly worried about, where is Bruce Wayne? What is he doing? If he really wasn't okay to that extent, he would have gotten help because people would have seen it. The Riddler, and I feel like we get a line about this, but I don't even remember really, has been invisible.
Yeah, he says.
He calls himself invisible. I've been invisible my whole life.
No one's seen him, and the thing is, it zooms in on his like little photograph of himself with the question mark around him in his apartment. It's like he's he exists. He's a citizen of Gotham. He is documented. Like he's here. He's a person. But in the grand scheme of things, he gets completely overrun, and that anonymity is what allows him to create his mask. It's what allows him to create a persona.
And like
he and
he's-
Bruce had to forge their masks, their fake identities in completely diverging ways.
Yeah, and like he mentions, like he only really got to be himself once he put the masks on. He sees Batman and he's like, we know I'm looking at the real you right now. What's under your mask does not matter. I wish you could have seen me in my mask. Like he and Bruce, again, they do the same thing where they've foregone whatever person exists outside of the Batman and the Riddler completely. They are just these masks, just these personas, and it's again Bruce with the whole like child thing. Bruce throws a straight up tantrum at the idea that he and Riddler are at all similar. And they're not just similar, they might as well be the same person, except one of them is willing to murder. And like Bruce internalizing that, I love that he throws a
If you cross that line, you
He-
become just like him.
but like what I love is he throws a damn tantrum. He's like trying to punch through the glass so he can get at this guy for even daring to suggest that they might be the same. And like we hard cut away from that conversation. He enters the crime scene again, and you'd be like totally okay with that scene's over, the mood has changed, we're back in like stable mode. But we cut from that conversation to him re-entering the crime scene. Pattinson enters the frame, and his face is still so shook.
Yeah, he still looks panicked.
Yeah, that conversation is like still going on in his head right
It
now.
takes it out of it because first of all, there are so many layers of fear there. There are so many different things to be afraid of that I feel like he doesn't know which one to pick for a second. He's just like, oh god, what do I do? Who do I go to?
Yeah.
Another thing I want to mention about the Riddler, this movie gets so much great comedy mileage out of him. Like, thanks everyone for the tips on detonators.
Yeah. But someone who was
The
it?
hearts on his live video.
What was the tweet that said, you know that Paul Dano had to like watch actual YouTube streams to get the perfect YouTube streamer voice?
Yes.
And he's just like, hey guys.
Yes. I was like, wow. You met some new content creators, huh?
God, it's
And, you know, it was crazy. Like, they did such a beautiful job of modernizing his character.
yeah, and like modernizing, yes, but also just taking him and making him not just modern, but like really, really deep in a way that you could only do with the Riddler. Because the big thing that always sticks out to me in terms of giving this Riddler an ethos in the same way that like the Dark Knight gave Joker a definitive ethos is when again Gordon's reading from the journal and he's like, to make people understand you can't just give them answers, you have to torment them with the horrifying questions. And like that's a thing that like that cracks the Riddler as a concept wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Like that should be the line that defines the Riddler and everything from now on.
Yeah.
Is like, I've spent my whole life questioning why me? Why did this have to happen to me? Questions are what I'm gonna use
Questions are the answer.
to torture people, to wake people up. It's all gotta be questions. And it's like, I love it so much. I love it so much.
That's what really puts the fear of God in people. He has the chain around the DA, I forget his name.
Coulson.
He has the chain around Coulson's neck, like the little bomb thing. And he's like, you answer 3 riddles in 90 seconds or whatever it is, and I give you
3
the
riddles in 2 minutes, yeah.
3 riddles in 2 minutes. And it's just, this man would rather die than answer the questions. And that's what that's what he's trying to show the people of Gotham. It's like, you don't want to answer the questions, then you pay for it.
Mm. And like even in that scene where it's like he gives him the riddle, like the answer is justice, immediately goes into another question. You were supposed to be justice, were you not, Mr. Coulson?
He is taking. Listen. He's great as a character, great as an actor. I don't like him, but he's making some points. He is really taking these people to task. Like and I mean, besides the murder part, he's really got the whole city on lockdown. His little videos are like played on the news, and when I saw that, because the news segments were really what got me, because they look so real, like they look like our news, and I was just like, this is so like this would be the kind of thing that we'd see on the news, and like my grandma would pull me aside and be like, you need to make sure that you're safe when you get on the subway. Like, he's really, while he's doing all this, before they catch him, he has got an absolute chokehold on this city. He's not Batman, but I think he has more reach than he gives himself credit for. He says, like, I don't have the power to make people listen, but you do. You have the power to make people listen, just people like you. Batman doesn't have that, because by the time this, like, when we're at the beginning of this movie, Batman's not a person. He has no influence with people except to put the fear of God in them. And you have managed to ally people to your cause. You have not friends, but you have comrades. You have people who are willing to do what you're going to ask them to do. Bruce has literally nobody. Everyone in this city hates Batman. Even the people who he's trying to save are deathly afraid of him.
Please don't hurt me.
Please don't hurt me, after he just beat up your attackers.
And like,
that's how brutal this man was.
Before we move on, like the last bit of like really direct paralleling between the two of them, like this movie is priming you to see them as parallels and like the same person from the first shot, because we open this movie with the shot through the binoculars of the Riddler watching somebody interact with a loved one through their window.
And then we get that with Bruce and Selina and Annika.
And like Riddler, and then tying into Selina, where she's like, you assume the worst in people. Riddler really does assume the worst in people. He sees this really heartwarming moment between father and son, does not care, does not process the humanity in it at all. Bruce sees Selina comforting Annika, and even though it's not clear to him yet, he is internalizing that humanity. And like the first time that he and Selina interact properly, that ends with like this implicit understanding that this is your friend, I can help you help your friend, you can trust me. Mm-hmm. And he hands her the passport.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
it's like, why don't we go talk to him?
Just in that moment of having watched these two people, Bruce has become a little bit more human. And Riddler could have had that, but he just does not see it. He only sees the worst. After Riddler, we have Penguin, who I just think is a hoot. And Eden lost her mind when I told her that was Colin Farrell.
We all did. We all did, because ain't no way, ain't no damn way.
God, I love him.
He's so entertaining, and yet he's also interesting enough to warrant his own story. Like, I'm interested in seeing what his show ends up being, because what we establish with him is that he actually has integrity. Mm. Like, when they accuse him of being the rat, he's like, I ain't no rat. And he's not. Not only does he not rat out on anybody, I don't think he tells a single lie over the course of the movie. But
he chastises, like, he'll omit certain truths when he's getting interrogated by Batman at the beginning. He's like, whoa, look at that. It is the mayor. Like,
yeah.
Cheeky little bastard.
But like, you're right. When they get Falcone, he's like, he gets on his case for being a rat. Like, you broke the code. So yeah, and like, with Gotham being where it's at by the end of the movie, like him in a position of like a chance to grab some power, I'm eager to see what we do with this guy. And the Penguin waddle is the joke that gets me every time.
It's just his damn Chelsea boots. Like, it's just his little heels. Who are you trying to make yourself taller for? Just put on some layers, man.
But aside from him, I guess it makes sense to talk about Falcone. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention. I didn't know John Turturro was in this movie until I saw it for the first time. And for someone who shows up pretty often in Batman stories, Carmine Falcone's never been a character that sticks with me. I really like this version. John Turturro's just really charismatic.
Oh, Falcone. Falcone is a Nolan thing. He added the pronunciation of the Falcone.
I use them
so-
interchangeably.
Yeah, it's like Raz and Raish.
No, because the people in this movie, some of them say Falcone, some of them say Falcone. No one in the damn city knows how to say it, so I'm certainly not gonna.
I
be
was
worried
paying
about
attention to the pronunciation on my second viewing. I could swear that in the hospital, Alfred calls him both, like a few sentences
pretty
apart.
because who cares? It's like saying like Ariana Grande, and then someone was like, "Yeah, her name is supposed to be pronounced Ariana Grande." First of all, no one's saying that. I don't care. Nobody ever at all is going to say that. I'm so sorry. Be offended about it. I'm not saying it. That's weird. That's
We're not mixing her with Gandhi.
Oh wait, but she has a song about that. Well, never mind.
He has a venti brain.
Oh, Venti Grande! Oh man, meme culture, fantastic. Yeah, so like it's one of those things that like I'm really not too caught up about. I just find it funny that even the people in Gotham, some people say it one way, some people say it the other way. It's like, ain't nobody care. You know who we talking about.
Yeah. But yeah, I really like John Turturro. Like he doesn't show up in a ton of mainstream stuff, but I really like him here. Because the thing is, when he's talking with Bruce, and I should have mentioned this in my issues with the movie. I feel bad that I forgot to bring up this point. I feel like the movie should have let us sit a little longer with the idea that maybe Falcone's version of the story was true. I don't think enough time passes between us hearing his version of events and then us hearing Alfred's version of events for it to really settle and feel like momentous the way that it does for Bruce. Because Turturro does a really good job of selling that story of where like clearly this guy is a scumbag, but the way he delivers it and the way that he treats Thomas Wayne with a little bit of reverence and just I had a moment where I believed on my first viewing that he was legit, and this is just how it went down. And like part of that is just on Turturro doing a really good job.
But it's also in part because of Falcone's like it gives insight to his character, because like you think, okay, Falcone, like mobster, really ruthless guy, like killed Selena's mom, all this other stuff. But there's something, and you get it in the voicemail with Annika too, there's something extremely insidious about a man who's just kind about it the whole way through.
Even as he's strangling her, he's just like, easy.
He never raises his voice, he never gets upset. The man is just calm to a fault all the way through. You can tell that he is, they're not wrong. This man has had this whole city in his pocket for 20 plus years. And he moves like that. He speaks like that. He says everything as if it's undeniable truth, because no matter what he says, there are people who will back it up.
I think that's the thing that maybe
he's like a god.
I think that's maybe the thing that makes it for me, because like I think of mainly 3 other versions of this character. I think of the one from the Nolan movies, the one from The Long Halloween, and the one from Gotham. And all 3 of those guys are kind of hotheads. Like they seem a little bit insecure in the power that they have. This guy, he just owns everything.
Well, because the other versions of this character are it's Falcone and Maroni, and they're going like
feuding
toe to toe.
Here, Maroni's got no power.
Yeah, like this Maroni could maybe try to attempt a power grab, but he would have to put real work into that. Like Falcone has the city in the palm of his hand. He is the central player here.
And I don't want to jump around because like I want to talk about Gordon in a minute, but like the whole Thomas Wayne backstory thing brings us to a point that we had talked about that I wanted to be sure to bring up, which is that it didn't occur to me until you mentioned it that in this movie, we don't know for a fact that Bruce was even present for his parents' death, and that ties into like another thing that we're doing with his character, where we open with, I have to review the footage, I have to force myself to review the footage just to remember what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this Bruce has, like, not like a literal memory issue, but he's got a memory issue.
If this were a book, he'd be an extremely unreliable narrator.
The reason that he needs the context of his parents' death and like what they were doing explained to him by Falcone, by Alfred, is in part that like he's detached himself from that memory, assuming he even has it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to speak to the Falcone scene where he talks to Bruce. So first of all, I just love the kind of like really not necessarily subtle but interesting setup and payoff of him going there first as Batman. Do you know who I am?
Mm-hmm.
And then taking the completely different approach of, do you know who I am as Bruce Wayne? And then just gets let right in and gets the information that he needs.
And like total confidence the first time and just broken man the second time.
And
Yeah.
like I like that he has to rely on being a human being in order for that to work. Like
And you can tell he's uncomfortable in doing that.
He's so uncomfortable.
because he hasn't been. We don't know at this point how long he's been, like how long it's been since he's taken up the mantle of Batman.
2 years.
It's been
2
at
years.
least 2 years. 2 years. That's a relatively. It seems short, I guess, but that's a long time because first of all, you don't just decide one day that you're going to be Batman. That takes years of preparation. You have to go off and train and do all these other things, and you have to learn how to shoot a gun and all. Like you have things that you have to do, barring the fact that forget about the Batmobile, the bat suit, batarangs, whatever you've got at your disposal. You need to design and craft and wait for all of that to be done, which means this was a long process. And that whole time, plus the 2 years he's actually spent out in the field as Batman, has been him dehumanizing himself. So when he gets to the point where he has to be Bruce Wayne, he has to be a real person to, get his answers, the only way that can happen is if he's broken as a person. That like he could not have shown up to try to talk to Falcone in any other state. It wouldn't have worked.
And when they're talking to each other, this just, maybe I'm reading into this. I'm sure you guys will let me know. But I just thought that this was one of those scenes. And this goes back to the main complaint that a lot of people have that this movie's too long. It is just a straight up extensive dialogue expository scene. And when Bruce first comes in, we have Falcone playing pool with Penguin. Penguin then stops, tells everyone else to leave, and it's just him. He was playing an actual game with Penguin, and then he just periodically goes to continue to play pool by himself throughout the conversation, just so there's some visual stimuli for the audience, so they don't just feel like two heads talking.
Yeah. I also like that we never see Falcone do work, ever. We see him play games. We see him lounging. We see him walking through the club with Penguin, but Penguin's the one who's like chiding the girls and like, keep it festive down here. Penguin's the one who's counting the money, dealing drops to take to 44 below. Like,
Yeah.
Falcone is vibing. This man is like sitting on a throne.
You did make me realize, not even something I'd call an issue, but just like a weird thing, which is that the implication is that he doesn't recognize that Selina is his daughter.
Yeah.
And yet their first interaction seems like he very much does.
Oh, no. See, and that's, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. That, to me, personally, that interaction did not read as father-daughter. That interaction actually did read as this is someone I have slept with. And I hate that. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I
didn't think
way off base. But
I didn't
that's
think anything of it on first viewing,
Oh.
but on repeat viewings, his line reads strike me as paternal.
I can't.
No, you don't like the. It's way too like the way he does the touching of her chin and how intimately he's
Right,
speaking.
Listen,
It doesn't
if
feel.
you
I'm not
want
gonna
to
say
grab
that
your
I.
kid's face, you don't do it like that. He is overly slow and sensual about
Yeah.
everything he does with her, and it
It's
really,
pretty predatory,
especially,
yeah.
especially since, like, I mean, we know she's been down there since she was a kid, but he makes the specific comment, like,
yeah,
oh,
that
it's
makes-
been a while
that
since
makes
I've
it
seen
worse.
you down here.
Yeah.
Like, and we know that she used to work down there too. So I just no, I'm sorry. This really reads as like I fucked her more than once, and I hate that. I
think-
hate
It's really hard for me to buy that he just straight up forgot that that's his kid.
Yeah, it's another one of those things of like Selena's background just being kind of vague and like we don't have
Yeah.
an actual timeline.
Yeah.
Which,
Because she was down there when she was up until she was 7. Then her mom got killed. Then
she
she
got
did.
taken away by child services.
Yeah, and for how long we don't know, but she made her way back there probably at the age of 18. Because that's when you're out of the system. You can do whatever you want, then you don't need a legal guardian anymore. So I'm assuming at the age of 18, she went back to try to find her father. And you know what? Honestly, I get it. Because it's not like she looks anything like Falcone. So if she left from 7 to 18 and then came back, he would not recognize her at all. She would be from a child to a grown woman, and one who shares absolutely none of his features, and one who frequently changes her hair color, her outfits, like.
But while he's also being incredibly predatory, he also speaks to her like he's seen her before.
Yeah, he has.
But I don't know that.
If she came back at 18 and started working at 44 Below, then yeah.
Okay, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
Because I can't
Like,
imagine that she would stay, like she gets to 18 and she would stay, and that's if I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt. That's if she waited until 18. Selena would absolutely just sneak away.
Even if she didn't come back at 18, like you haven't been down here in a while could mean a few months,
a few years.
She'd have to have been down there at some point to even know that it exists.
Exactly. She worked there. Like her mother worked there, Annika worked there, and so did she. For whatever reason, maybe it was because she really did need the money and she was a runaway kid, she didn't know what to do. Maybe it was because she really did want to find out if Falcone was the guy who killed her mom. Maybe she didn't know for sure. We don't know. All we know is that she spent time in there, and the implication, as far as I read it, was heavily implied that they have definitely slept together more than once. That's why when Bruce talks about, debasing, compromising yourself for money and how close did you have to get, she absolutely flips. She's like, I can't even talk to you right now. She doesn't even try to fight him. She straight up goes, I'm going to leave. I'm leaving this place because I cannot have this conversation anymore. And when she says because he's my father, it's said with such malice, such a vitriol that I'm just like, no, they slept together.
I'm thankfully not someone who's read that into it, and I don't want to read that into it. So.
I haven't read that into it either, but I think that the subtext is definitely there that he wants to. I don't get the impression it's already happened.
Yeah.
I feel like he acts like everyone is his property. So you know what? The implication could I could very easily believe that he wants to, but it hasn't happened yet. But it's specifically the way that he touches her and the way that he looks at her reads as like you're my property, and for more reasons than just because you work for me.
I don't know. This is absolutely a guy who treats women he has and hasn't slept with exactly the same way. So,
yeah, I don't know. That's just the reading I got from it. But whether it actually happened or whether it actually happened or he really wants it to happen, that whole situation is screwed. Because even if it hasn't happened and he wants it to, it's very blatantly obvious that he wants it to, and that means that Selena has been playing keep away for years with her father. And it's not, honestly speaking, this is Falcone. If he really wanted it to happen, do you think he couldn't make it happen? There's no way Selena would have said no and that would have stuck. Which means, to me, that yeah, they definitely slept together. But if you say they didn't, I will take it. I would prefer it that way.
So there's something else I want to ask you guys, and this goes towards the runtime with Falcone. So we have a lot of, and this works as well as it can for me. but there are a lot of scenes that are fairly expository, and it's like I get the show don't tell argument because of what this movie wants to do in telling its own straight up narrative, not being an origin, not showing the origin. There's a lot of telling and not showing that I think people read as lazy, like that story that we get from Falcone about the bullet wounds and Thomas actually taking those out and Bruce being there for that. Like, I think it was Chris Stuckman or some other reviewer that was like, yeah, I don't like that that's just talked about and we don't get to see that.
I like that as part of,
I just had a
again,
flashback to the Long Halloween.
yeah,
Like
that's-
it makes sense for me specifically because I saw that movie, so I had a visual in my head for that happening. But I can see people who hadn't seen that or thought of it in that scene having issue with it because it would be a little bit disappointing to not be able to see it. But personally, I don't have that because the Long Halloween is just stuck in my head forever.
I like that because then it's like kind of twofold, which is Bruce probably doesn't remember that,
Yeah.
and like if he does not care for that memory.
No,
And
he's
again-
buried that along with everything else.
Yeah,
And I really
and
like the fact that
spend we spend this entire movie, well, not entirely, but like structurally, we are locked into present Bruce's POV. This is not a movie that does flashbacks. Like, I think there's a worthwhile artistic choice to, like, yeah, it's telling and not showing, but sometimes there's things to be read into the choice to not show something.
Yep.
Like, we're not going to go back to the past. This is a present narrative. We're in the present all the time.
And also,
Yeah, I really like that choice too. This is the most Batman-centric movie. It doesn't have the Dark Knight thing of the villain taking over. We'll talk about the Dark Knight like that's Joker's movie.
Yeah. It also is the most time he spends just in costume.
Which is amazing. I freaking love that. He only goes in public twice, once for the funeral and once to see Alfred. Well, actually 3 times to see Falcone.
Yeah. And sorry, you were gonna say something, Brianna?
yes. What were you just saying? Because the thought has like escaped me now. Like the point that you
Not
just
flat. No flashbacks.
Right. So in the same vein of like Bruce dehumanizing himself and everything, I mentioned this to Nick leaving the first viewing that we know absolutely nothing about Bruce Wayne. We know nothing about him. We get these okay, I shouldn't say absolutely nothing. That's wrong. But we get this we get his journaling in the beginning. We get him like wearing these little contacts and stuff, and then you get to like the halfway point of this movie, or like not even the halfway point. You get to the point where he's talking to Alfred in the hospital, and I guess it's for me it was something I hadn't thought about up until that point, but I was like, my God, we don't even know what his origin is. We don't know anything about. I shouldn't say we don't know anything about Bruce Wayne because we know a surprising amount. We don't know anything about Batman. Like nothing. We have no basis for this.
We know he's been operating for 2 years, and we know that he's cultivated a sense of fear throughout the city.
Yeah.
And that's it. We have no detail. We have only the vaguest, most broad strokes, and I like that.
Yeah, we have the sense that Alfred taught him to fight, but we don't know what other training he received. We don't know what villains he's faced prior to now.
We get no flashbacks, and because of that, we have Bruce's unreliable narration and his like issues with memory, and that's pretty much it. We can gather that he doesn't have any friends, but or like people that he talks to. He's a recluse, he's a hermit. He kind of the character of Bruce Wayne just stays inside. He's not a public figure yet. Well, not on purpose anyway.
He does have the closest thing to a friend, which is Gordon.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Wright very quickly tops my Gordon tier list.
Yeah, why is he so good? It's just when you see someone like acting a role and you're like, this is just you, isn't it?
You know what's good? I like to call that like the Martin Freeman effect.
Yeah.
Martin Freeman is the guy that you cast to play someone who's just a dude.
Yeah.
And like in this movie, that's great because every other relevant character, even Falcone to an extent, is kind of this heightened persona.
Yeah.
Where like Falcone being so chill is like part of what makes him extreme and off-putting.
And what's
And-
awesome about this version of Gordon as compared to a lot of others, I mean, even, you know, to a significant degree, Nolan's Gordon, is that we don't have a relationship where Batman just shows up and kind of does most of the work for Gordon. Like, they're legitimate partners.
Yeah, like I could see like a buddy cop movie that's the two of them. That's almost what this is. It's
Gordon
almost like a
really said,
Lethal
"I
Weapon.
trust you only," and that's that. Like I love that he says
that, and then we get the scene later where it's like Selena's got Kenzie on the roof, and the Bruce shows up and he's like, "Did you?" And Gordon's like, "I thought that was you." And like, listen, okay, so Bruce calls his house from the Batmobile. He would never do something like that unless it was a secure line. That means this man has ways to procure a secure line. And he works with Gordon and trusts Gordon often enough that he's like, "I don't even need a secure line with you. I could have called you and I didn't. The bat signal went up. I asked no questions. I got in my car and I drove here." Like, these two are real ride or dies for each other. Gordon really said, "Yes, I will put my job and my reputation on the line.
And my jaw.
And my jaw on the line in front of my boss for you, because you doing the people's work." And Bruce is like, Bruce, with absolute certainty, he has never ever even asked Gordon, "Oh, the Riddler's not after you. Why? Because you're not
crooked.
corrupt. Like, I know you." These two are like besties, BFFs. As much as Bruce Wayne / Batman can have a friend,
you know
it's
what-
Gordon.
You know what this is like? This is like the totally like down to earth, like straight dramatic version of Bruce and Gordon in the Teen Titans Go cartoon, where like practically every time you see Batman in Teen Titans Go, it's him and Gordon laughing over something, or like having a sleepover, or just in the Batmobile just goofing off and hanging out.
Honestly, I don't know about that because I refuse to watch Teen Titans Go. However, I can say that it very much fits my vibe of the Batman animated series. My favorite episode where they have all the Christmas and New Year's stuff that happens, and like at the end of the New Year's one,
The New
Gordon-
Year's tradition is that
yeah,
they
the New
meet
Year's
up.
tradition is they meet up for coffee, and Gordon gets a little pie thing to take home with him, and then he turns around and like Bruce left money on the table and he leaves, and Gordon's like, "One day I'll pay for the bill," and then he like walks out with the pie off into the snow, and it's beautiful, it's gorgeous.
It's a beautiful friendship.
That's this, like, I could picture it somewhere in this movie, somewhere far in the like future of this movie, Bruce and Gordon, like 10 years down the line, have just developed this tradition that they show up to this random diner. You know what? The diner where they caught the Riddler. They show up there
Yeah.
every year on New Year's Eve, and they get a cup of coffee together, and Bruce pays and he vanishes, and then Gordon walks out into the night.
But yes,
That's awesome.
yes.
There's so much great comedy moments between them too. Like when they both go to the orphanage, and he's like, "No guns," and he's like, "That's your thing, man. I'm
Yeah.
pulling out my gun."
And it took the 3 viewings for me to realize, like, when they realize that like his next target is Bruce Wayne, and he flashes the flashlight and Batman's gone, he just gives this little, "Hey." Like, this has clearly not happened often enough to where he's used to it. He's like, "What?"
Because
Ugh.
Gordon's really the only one who interacts with Batman. Everyone else kind of just tolerates his presence. Like when he shows up to the mayor's house to like look at the body, and the guy's just like, "Excuse me," and he like kind of shuffles awkwardly around him. Like, no, I feel like that's indicative of how the entire police force treats Batman. Like, some of them have outright hostility, and then there are a few, like the guy who was taking pictures, that are just like,
Literally don't know how to process a caped dude just hanging out there at their crime scene.
Which, now that I think about that, I like that we have the camera guy, because he's on scene and he's not actively hostile. And I like that in that beginning scene too, we see constantly, like in the background, one person, specifically one person, this one same asshole who goes to the funeral and goes, "Hi, Bruce Wayne."
Martinez.
And you've just called the Batman a freak, but whatever. Anyway, you have one police officer and then the boss, like the commissioner.
Pete, yeah, the commissioner.
You have him go like, "Batman, you can't come in here. Like, what are you kidding? I can't believe he's with you, Gordon." And everyone else, like Bruce walks forward, and it like you get a full like frontal shot of Bruce, and just blurred out in the background are all the other police officers staring. Like, no one's said anything. No one's been outright hostile except for that one person, but that's so much the general trend of things
Mhm.
Yeah,
that
you can read
all
the
the other
animosity
police
he's walking through.
officers. I think it is animosity, but I think the more I think about it, it seems like just sheer uncertainty. It's like, what do you do when Batman walks into
Mhm.
the site of the murder you're investigating? And it's a high profile murder. It's the mayor of Gotham. And this man has been brutalized. He's got duct tape all over his face. They cut off his thumb while he was still alive. All these police officers are like, Batman shouldn't be here, but also, what is Batman doing here? Like, I love the fact that we don't have outright hostility except for from two of them.
That does feel like one of the most real scenes in the movie.
Yeah, like one of them dances around him kind of awkwardly, like, "I don't know what to do about you
Like,
being
this
here,
is strange.
but I'm okay with it as long as you're supervised. If you showed up on your own, I don't know how I'd feel. But you know what? As long as Gordon's with you, I trusted Gordon, so it's fine." I feel like the general trend of the police of Gotham, or at least the ones that we get to see, is I don't trust Batman, but I trust Gordon. So if Gordon's here with Batman, then like I guess it's okay. I'm not fine with it, but I will live.
In the interest of time, let's talk about the music.
Yes.
Because the score for this movie is freaking excellent. I've added Catwoman's theme to my sleep playlist. It's the music I've used to fall asleep to for like the past 2 weeks.
Catwoman's theme is absolutely entrancing. Like every time it plays on screen, those are the times that I get the most sucked into the world of the movie. Not necessarily because she is on screen, just because that music really sets the whole tone of the movie for me.
It's a lot of the music choices I feel like contribute to this movie feeling heightened and comic book-y.
Yes.
To where like this is a very grounded like quote unquote realistic story, but it's still got like the vibes and feeling of like something that's just a bit heightened from regular reality, and a large part of that is the music like creating this tone.
Wait, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna throw in there for whoever is listening to this, because I mentioned this to you and I didn't get to say it to Malik. So on the last card that Bruce opens up from the Riddler, I don't know if I was just really tired when I was watching the movie this last time, but like the Riddler has drawn these like concentric, not circles, but like weird geometric shapes around the border of the card. And I was looking at that, I was like, I wonder what this is. And I think it was the map that he had hidden under his rug. Like he gave Bruce a clue. He was like, I'm gonna just draw a map of the city. And then you like pull up the rug and it's like, oh, this is where the bombs are. Okay, now continue. But if anyone else is like listening to this and they saw that card and they like wondered what that was, maybe I'm not the only one who thought that was what it was.
Let us know in the comments. Is Bryanna crazy?
Yeah, honestly,
But,
let us know. The answer's probably yes, but like let us know anyway.
But yeah, like I've told both of you this like separately. Like the Riddler's theme, like the music, specifically the music that's playing like while he fights the goons, because that's what's called the Riddler's theme on the track list.
Yeah.
That sounds like something from out of a Schumacher movie in the best way, where like it sounds like really heightened and bombastic and not
There's
at all.
this like evil, sinister whimsicalness to it.
Yeah.
I wish I studied music like in more depth. I wish I knew more about it, because I would love to compare the Riddler's theme to like the full Batman theme from this movie to see like where they.
Well, the thing is, like Riddler's like actual character theme is just Ave Maria in a minor key.
Yeah, but I wouldn't.
Which is a good choice.
Yes,
it is.
But I mean, in terms of like pure instrumentation.
Okay. Yeah, I
Because
get
we've been like putting the Riddler and Batman or Nashton and Bruce
the
as
parallels are
foils.
so strong that
Yeah,
like
that I
it's got to be
wonder-
there in the music also.
I wonder how it's reflected in the music. So again, if anyone knows about that, you can also comment that because I want to know about that.
And like I could understand if someone had a complaint about the score being repetitive because so much of the movie is built on contrasting Bruce and Riddler and Selina, and those three character themes are pretty much 90% of the soundtrack. It's one of those three themes playing or some variation throughout pretty much the entire movie.
But I feel like you have to do that because the theme, an overarching theme, not the theme, but an overarching theme of the whole movie is repetition. The sins of your father, what they said they would do with Gotham, but they never did. Selina coming back to deal with her father. Bruce having to go through the Riddler's, riddles again and again and again. It's like you ever watch Merlin? Like neither one of you watched it, but the running joke is that Merlin is like 5 seasons of the same plot every damn episode. It's like that. The movie feels obviously more, feels like it has more variety than that because it does. Not just I love Merlin. I'm trash for that, but I do. But, what's it called? That like to have a running theme in the film be callbacks, constant callbacks. Of course, you're going to be repeating the same themes. It's the themes of the movie are reflected in the music, as far as I can tell.
It's
and
also
I think that's cool.
These people are kind of stuck until they're not.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. The other really bold thing about the score for this movie is Michael Giacchino developed it as soon as he got the job. He was like, you know what, screw it. I'm not waiting for you to even finish filming the movie. I'm making the score right now. So they would listen to, and this Matt Reeves talked about this in dozens of interviews. This informed Robert's performance in particular. He would listen to his theme to get into character.
Wow.
That's so cool.
That's actually quite nice, and like that could have gone really poorly. It's amazing that they
so like, it's
worked
crazy
with
how it fits so well because they edited the movie to the music. The music was already made.
That's awesome. Speaking of the rest of just the technical aspects,
Once again, everyone who had a hand in this movie is a master in their craft.
but most of all, Matt Reeves, that man's direction, freaking just look.
The shots that we were getting, the lighting, the coloring, all the symbolism, sir.
Again, I'm not eager to like compare this to other movies just because so much of the discourse around it has already been like, oh, it's so good that it makes everything else in this genre look like trash.
Oh, would you please?
But
or we immediately have to take pot shots at the MCU for not being this.
Yeah, and like
who's out here doing that?
A lot of people. Full fat videos.
People who have like, understandably, in a way that I don't relate to, but I understand, who've spent years basically looking at the MCU and seeing a studio style. Like, those movies have a house style.
Oh, absolutely they do.
And for the people who are like super into the visual technical aspects of filmmaking, they've been really bothered by that for a long time.
Oh,
And
okay,
this
I get that.
and this movie
It's
is
a
like
change of pace for me.
the hardest I've seen a director thumbprint on a comic book movie in a long time.
Yes.
So like I'm happy for those people that they've got this, because this is worth celebrating. This is some good shit, man.
Yeah, Matt Reeves was the guy to get to do this. And I applaud Warner Brothers for how they approached this, because when you listen to Matt Reeves tell the story of how he even got this project in the first place, Warner Brothers went after him. They really wanted him to direct this movie. And he had read Affleck's script, which obviously was a more action-focused thing. He was like, yeah, this isn't really, for me, but maybe some other director will want to do this. And Warner was like, hey, no. Like, what do we have to do to get you to direct this movie? Like, we're more than willing to work with you on this. And he's like, I have my idea for something that I would want to do. Now, if you guys are okay with what I want to do, then I'll go with it. But if it's going to be some micromanaged thing, and if I have to conform to a certain set of pre-established plot points or whatever, then I'm not really interested. And they were like, go for it. Do what you want to do with the film. Now I think there are some clear compromises. Well, not even compromises, i.e., they wouldn't even let Colin Farrell's Penguin have a cigarette.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Oh, you know what? I hadn't even thought about it.
Yeah, it's weird because like hearing about it, it's like, oh, that's such a studio thing. But watching the movie,
he
like,
didn't need.
yeah, watching the movie, none of whatever studio mandates there were like meaningfully impacted anything. And like I mentioned this in my video, but Matt Reeves, not just in the visual aspect, I think we can thank him for a lot of the performances not just working but like gelling together the way they do, because he's such an actor's director. Like from this to his two Apes movies to why am I the we just watched it, a Cloverfield.
Yeah.
Like he's just so good at getting performances that almost feel like they could belong in different movies but gel perfectly in the given movie also.
He's got the vibe exactly right. So even if there are a lot of moving parts, they all seem like they're moving parts of the same machine. It's like looking at the inside of a car. Like you are one cohesive unit. You just all do completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
And character is at the forefront of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with the Apes movies. Like he'll put in scenes with the Apes movies in particular, don't even necessarily propel story, but just enhance character.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
right. In the theme, in the thread of enhancing character, I was telling Nick about this when we were on the walk home from this. So for me, second viewing, for Nick, third. The scene where Bruce is fighting with Selena, when she's got the passport and she's trying to find Annika's passport, and he like is holding her in this like bear hug.
Yep.
While the security guard's passing by, the camera slowly zooms in on the two of them while the guy's walking by, and you can tell like Bruce has not been touched by Alfred, by anybody else, because he doesn't go outside. You know the man's not going to see a doctor because he couldn't explain all the bruises. This man has not been touched physically in years. When he fights, up until that point, when he fights, he physically throws people away from himself. He will hold someone up against a wall and tase their neck instead of grabbing them. You know, he's not tactile like that. But with Selena, he grabs her to hold her still and keep her quiet, and you can see the fact that he's really conceptualizing the fact that he is holding someone, he's touching someone for the first time in years. Like that scene I adore, for the both of them, but mostly for Bruce's character, because that's what opens up the door for him to start becoming more, I guess, of an emotional character. Like you needed a foot in the door, and Alfred wasn't doing that for him.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't possible for Alfred to be that kind of influence, because Alfred doesn't, if he even tried to touch Bruce would just be like, no. Like he would physically move out of the way. With Selena, not only does he like pin her on the table, he holds her, and even if it's just through the suit, you really get a sense that like he's taking this in. Like for him, it seems like an important moment.
To speak to that, there's another scene later that I really like, when he's giving Selena the contacts and she's like, wow, you really don't care what happens to me, do you? And then he's like, look at me. And he's completely shutting down any sort of like emotional connection, and it's just all business.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you, like, I feel like...
And how much of Bruce is doing that because he wants that intimacy and is not conscious of it.
Bruce is always shutting down his own needs. Oh, you're going to lose your parents' company. You're going to lose their legacy.
I don't care about any of that. This is their legacy.
Right. Like, oh, I don't care what happens to me. That's what I'm worried about. Like, Bruce has no care for himself at all. And seeing him interact with another human being that's not Gordon for a prolonged period of time really highlights the fact that Bruce has to do that on purpose. Every time he
It's
feels
got to be a conscious choice, yeah.
Every time Bruce feels a yearning to get close to someone, he has to like manually go, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to suppress this urge. It's never subconscious for him. He's constantly a man at war with himself. And Selena is meeting Selena is the inciting incident for like a landslide of emotions to just start pushing forward inch by inch by inch.
And he's okay saying goodbye to her by the end, because by the end he's become that person who's okay with being touched.
Yeah.
I think, and this will be really cool and very new territory to give us a Bat family in this kind of tone. I'm very interested to see this Batman maybe get a Robin.
Yes.
Oh, I would love to see
Yes,
that.
I said that on the way home. Like, yes, I can see this Batman having one.
I think it would be really rough at the beginning though, because God, the amount of there are many ways I could say this, and I'm not going to say any of them because they would all be far too long. But let's just say it would be really, really, really bad for him to have a Robin before it got better. I want him to have one, but there would be a lot of mistakes that happened there.
I mean, he's going to be facing even worse circumstances with the city the way it is.
And I don't think he's gonna know what to do about it. Like, he'd be sure gung-ho about, like, you wanna fight crime, you can do it with me, I don't care, just take care of yourself in the field. But the second he manages to get any sort of attachment to that person, it's gonna be this constant push and pull of like, you shouldn't be here, and now I'm worried about you, and what if you get hurt, and God forbid the person does get hurt, it's gonna be like another Alfred. Like, Bruce isn't ready to have multiple people to care about. He doesn't even know how to care about himself yet. So like, I would love to see him have a Robin, but if that happened so soon on the tail of this movie, it would be a really one hell of a rough start for both of them.
I'd be interested to see if Matt Reeves does with these movies what he did with the Apes movies, where there's like a significant amount of time between each one.
I hope so, because that would allow us to jump in the next movie right into Bruce Wayne has a social persona now.
And
like
Gotham is a functional setting once again.
Gotham is a
unless we deal with like the almost kind of no man's land, like flooded out a city in Kingpin's show. I'm really not a fan of that idea.
But
because really, what do you do with a city that's like, what do you do with a city that's underwater up to the top of Madison Square Garden? Like, first of all, you're canoeing everywhere. You're helicoptering these people out, but to where?
It's Ponyo.
New Jersey? It is Ponyo! There's fish in the streets. There's sharks between the buildings. Like, how do you, even if you could like rebuild your walls somehow through the just standing water that's everywhere, even if you could have that happen, you'd have to get this like giant Hoover suction thing to like get all the water out. You'd be taking a whole bunch of stuff with it. Debris, half of buildings, cars, things that people lost because they live in the city. It's like, what kind of insurance covers this? Who's paying for this? How do you get reparations? Like, the city of Gotham is not going to be, at least in the sense of like the people, maybe you can rebuild buildings, but like fixing the lives of these people is, I struggle to think of something that would equate. Maybe Hurricane Katrina. Like, people are still trying to fix things from that. It's been a very, very long time. It's like you.
Speaking of time,
are we?
We should get to conclusions.
Yeah, closing thoughts.
This movie's like a damn Swiss watch. Like, the very few things about it that don't work are just, like I said, such small peanuts. And like, I can always tell when a movie's like a capital G great for me when like I talk about it with you guys, and just the act of talking about it is like so much fun because it makes me appreciate it so much more. And just like this, God, I fucking love this movie. Like, I'm gonna watch this a million times. Probably not immediately. Right now, I'm feeling like 3 times in theaters is good. I want to like give it some space just to ruminate. But once this drops on HBO Max, which is going to be like in a month, I'm going to go nuts. I'm going to be watching this constantly.
I very much would like to revisit this when it's on streaming services. I think I'm satisfied with seeing it twice in theaters. I want to watch this like from my own home and have time to like pause and take notes and reanalyze all this good stuff.
And you never want to take notes about things, so that says something about this movie.
That's true. I don't take notes about things. I just kind of watch them and then we vibe. But this one I could take notes on just because there's so much going on with these characters. It's great.
And you guys know me and what I do. I will definitely be making a video on this movie. This is the Batman movie I've always wanted. I'm so glad that we have it. It's an epic addition to the legacy of Batman films. I'm definitely not going to be seeing it in theaters anymore either. One, I need to save. And two, as much as I would like to beat the No Way Home record of 7 times in theaters, this is a long movie.
Yeah.
It is rather long. Also, it was nice to get to see the twins from Teen Wolf. Because
It was pretty awesome to see them. I also don't agree that it's too long. Like, I think it was definitely the right amount that it needed to be to tell us. And you can't cut a scene out of this movie.
I think it was the right length, but if we're gonna keep on with the trend of making movies this long again, because we went from really long movies to shorter movies, and now we're verging back into really long territory, please, for the love of God, I am begging you, put intermissions in your movies. I want to get up, I want to stretch my legs. If you're gonna make me sit in the theater for 3 hours, especially in the case of like MCU, you have to sit through the credits because there's after credit scene, and then sometimes there's 2 after credit scenes.
I do think maybe the only potential issue with that is that back when movies had intermissions, they were kind of structured almost like a 2-part thing. Where,
and also, if you have intermissions, you're gonna be able to show less movies per day because you're gonna have less time.
Where you kind of had to like build to a denouement and then have your intermission and then ramp back up, and I get like not wanting to do that with your movie.
Yeah, which is.
I mean, I did have to violently pee like during the second viewing and my last one, but just I wasn't gonna get up. I wasn't getting up from the theater, even though I'd already seen the movie. I'm like, I'm not moving. I'll just hold.
I wanted to move. I wanted to. By the time we were in this movie, I had like this bag of Skittles in my pocket, and I was like, bro, I don't know what about this particular viewing is taking the soul out of my body. But if I don't move, I'm going to fall asleep. And so what I did was I took the Skittles one by one. The only thing that was keeping me awake was eating. I was eating one singular Skittle as slowly as possible for the last hour and a half of that movie.
Oh, that's hysterical.
I need to move. I can't. I can sit like that like at home because I have the option to pause, but not having the option to pause stresses me out. The more I can't move, the more I want to move. So like, I love a good long film. I really do. Just not in the movies. Please give me a break.
We are already
so let's
nearing.
Hop over to Peacemaker.
Yeah, we are already nearing my designated cap time, but in interest of fairness to this show, because this show deserves it, I'm gonna give us like 25 minutes to talk about Peacemaker. Which this is where I actually had like 0 expectations, just because I loved the Suicide Squad so much, but coming out of that movie and being immediately hit with Peacemaker's getting a show was such an odd thing for me, where I'm like, I don't know how to respond to that. I have absolute faith that James Gunn is going to make something good, but like I've got no clue what that even looks like. And then just watching the show and getting to be surprised by pretty much all of it was a really, really good time. And like my one thing was that the only thought I had about this show before I'd seen any of it was total reservation of like, there's no way they could endear me to Peacemaker after the Suicide Squad. Where like that
Me too.
That movie did such a good job of endearing you to him and then pulling the rug out from under you.
To be
And
fair, I still wasn't endeared to him that much by the end of Peacemaker, but like I didn't actively want him to die anymore.
which is, something. But like, I think it says a lot. Like, we've talked a lot about like performance, but it says a lot that part of what makes me like so invested in Christopher Smith is just the perfect casting of John Cena. And like, this is almost, I feel like, the role John Cena was born to play, and he just gets this character on a bone deep level, and it's just it's like magic watching the man perform this part. It's so good.
So yeah, the Suicide Squad for me was easily the best comic book movie of last year. I thought I didn't have the best reaction to us immediately retconning him getting killed in that movie. But once I found out James Gunn was doing the show, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what he's doing, which was actually really smart and really cool. Was taking the most, and he talks about this in interviews, taking easily the most despicable and hated character in that movie and making a series about him was super cool and bold, because it instantly forces you to make a show and try to, I mean, sure, I guess you want on some level the character to be likable, but to try to get the audience on board with him as a protagonist, I thought was a really brave and strong choice. But it was also, it gives you the most room to grow him as a character, to start him at the bottom and then bring him up to a place where you could actually say this is a character that you like.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's such a James Gunn thing to tackle, to make basically the mission statement of the show, taking this completely hateable guy and spending however many hours just digging in deep to find the heart there. And part of why I say John Cena is so perfectly cast is that John Cena is really good at playing obnoxious and playing kind of punchable, or like you would punch him if you weren't a beef mountain. But also, he's just so inherently charming. Like, even when he's being an awful person, you kind of just want to be friends with John Cena. He seems like a fun guy to be friends with, and that never really stops being the case.
This is true. Like, of all the incredibly insane, tone deaf, vulgar, ridiculous things that he says, it's incredibly endearing. And this show also has given us what I like to call DC's Deadpool and Vigilante, and he's a treasure. He's absolutely hilarious.
I'm gonna say that I prefer Vigilante to Deadpool, just because Vigilante is Deadpool if you replaced all of the cynicism with earnestness. Like, Deadpool's whole thing is that like he snarks at everything. He's got like this too cool for school attitude. He kind of feels like he's above whatever thing happens to be happening to him. Vigilante's just honestly having fun with every situation he finds himself in. And like, I enjoy that dynamic more.
Vigilante is my babyest baby boy, and he will never do anything wrong, and I love him.
And I have a whole video about him, which you should watch. It's really good. And to talk about like the topic of that video, again, just a James Gunn thing is like taking a whole ensemble of like fundamentally really broken people and making them into not just like characters who pretty much instantly become iconic and like, yeah, I'd watch these guys in anything, but making them taking the brokenness and making it just as much a source of like goofy ass comedy, and also just like, God, this is so sad, and like there's depths of sadness here that people feel just on the regular.
I do want to go ahead and get my two negatives out of the way with this show, just really quick. And I'm curious to see what you think of these, Nick. So for me, I think it was episode 3 when he's tasked with shooting the family, and he hesitates and can't do it even after seeing them all protrude alien tongues. Um, I felt like that moment was really arbitrary, and it's only happening now because we want him to suddenly be grappling with killing people because he's the main character, and we want him to start this struggle now, not because of any real reason, but just because we the writers have decided this is when this happens now.
I can't entirely disagree. I felt taken out by that moment for a slightly different reason because I read it a little bit differently. I I think that moment's not supposed to be like indicative of he's been having a crisis of conscience over killing people, although the fact that we, like cut back to his killing of Rick Flag and clearly he's incredibly guilty over that. Uh, that is, I guess you could say, the inciting incident for him wondering if maybe he just doesn't want to kill people anymore. What I took from that is in the movie and in the show, he's like, I'll do anything for peace no matter how many men, women, and children I have to kill to get it. I get the feeling that he says that, but he's never actually killed a child before. And being asked to do it right now is just not like it's a first for him, and he can't bring himself to actually cross that line no matter how much bluster he makes out of it. I still think it is very it's like it feels unearned because that's not something that we'd spent enough time like discussing with his character or building to, I don't think. And so like in the moment of watching it in the show, it does definitely feel like this is where we want to have this moment to facilitate the rest of the character growth. And so here it is.
Yeah, it just feels incredibly arbitrary.
And what was the second thing?
The second thing, oh yeah. So when Myrn is revealed to be a butterfly, um, I'm like, okay, this twist works, but then we spend so long, or at least, yeah, I thought it was cool. But then after that, we spend so long not explaining why he defected from the butterflies to when we finally get at the end this kind of throwaway explanation from Goff. I'm like, why was this a secret? Why couldn't we have just gotten a clear-cut reason as to why this one butterfly is deciding that human life is sacred or whatever?
Remind me what the explanation Goff gave was again?
Oh, it's pretty. She doesn't even really go into detail. She's just like, he didn't agree with our methods, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, that's one of those things where like
It almost makes making Myrna a butterfly completely arbitrary. Like it's just there so we can have a twist in one of the episodes because we really don't delve into it after that. It's kind of just a running gag that that Diebeard refuses to acknowledge it.
I think
Harcourt more or less plays it straight.
I think it's a meaningful choice to make it so that the butterflies are not 100% like evil. And we end the show in a place where Goff has gotten to be this very humanized character, and they and Peacemaker have formed some kind of rapport. And like the last shot of the show is Peacemaker with his best friend Eagly, the specter of his dad, and this figure who's been his antagonist basically throughout the whole show in Goff. And yet, again, like to Peacemaker's own character, for as much of a shitheel as he was and can be, the fact that Goff is like around and alive and they have this rapport speaks to Peacemaker's ability to see decency in everyone and be decent himself and offer some empathy. And Mern being a butterfly, I think, sets us up for that. We're like, yeah, these so easily could have just been evil aliens, and like we killed them indiscriminately, and we're gonna keep doing that. And it's just a complete black and white conflict. These guys are all bad. Whatever, who cares? Mern being a butterfly sets us up with the idea that no, these guys have a conscience, and like it's not even that the rest of them are evil, they're just desperate. And it really is only in need of an explanation as much as it would be if these were humans. Where like their home is gone, they are willing to kill for their what is it, like their vision of Earth and like their trajectory of saving Earth for themselves and the humans who will survive. And one of them just disagrees with that. It really is just as simple as Mern is a person who doesn't agree with killing people indiscriminately. And I don't know if we really need an explanation beyond that.
I think that in the not necessarily talking about the butterflies, but just the Peacemaker character, I think he has the potential to be like he's not there yet, but I think he has the potential to be the best judge of character on this show. Like way, way back in high school, we had to read Pride and Prejudice, and my teacher asked, like, who do you think is the best judge of character in this entire in the entire book? And the answer that we came to anyway was Mr. Darcy, the guy who talks to people the least, the guy who has the most trouble connecting and empathizing with other people, turned out to be the best judge of character because he felt so much and because he was so attuned to like everything that was going on. Peacemaker's like he's kind of adult, but he has a lot of emotions. He has a lot of feelings. He's I hate to say it, but minus the drinking respect women juice, he is a himbo. And he's, I think, given the right circumstances, very kind and emotionally adaptive. He can make friends very well. He just doesn't because his line of work necessitates that you don't really do that, except for like with Vigilante. And he tried with Waller's Kid, who I don't like, but still. I feel like he has the capacity to be the most emotionally knowledgeable among their group of friends, which is, wow, the bar is in hell. But I think I like that his character could do that. You could take him in a direction where that would happen. I don't think that's where that's going at all, but I like that we get that for him.
I feel like the show kind of drops the ball in making Anna Bio and Peacemaker the heart of this show. Kind of. I mean, it works. It works okay. But by the end, when we have that pretty obvious resolution between them, I'm like, this is a little rushed. Just a little bit. I don't feel like we did enough with those two together throughout the course of the show.
I think we did more than enough with the two of them throughout the course of the show. What feels rushed to me is that we open that episode with him so feeling betrayed by her and being very, very dismissive and displaying a lot of animosity towards her. And I'm not really sure what it is that brings him back around that strongly.
I want to say it's her like coming out of nowhere with the crazy gun skills and saving everybody, but he didn't even see most of that.
Yeah, he's not there for that.
Also, this does not this is unrelated. I'm just butting in here, but I loved her the little scene that she had like watching Eagly hug him.
Yeah.
I hate that was that good. Like I watched that and I was like, why am I crying? For what reason?
And just she calls her wife and is like, baby, I just saw an eagle hug a human.
It's a sign of Black Jesus.
No, because why wasn't it a sign for you to run away? Fuck.
Yeah, no, I really like Adebayo.
I like that line for her because it it really shows how like empathy and like being there for her friends is her first instinct. Like, oh, I saw an eagle hug a person. Shit's really getting real. She could have chosen that moment to be like, no, I really am getting the fuck out of Dodge. I don't belong here. And she was like, oh no, this is the sign that I'm supposed to stick around. Both, it's arbitrary. It could have been either one, but the one that she leaned towards was that first because that's her natural inclination. Again, I still don't like her, but I think that's nice. I think she's a nice person.
It makes all the sense in the world to me that Bryanna doesn't like Adebayo. I like her a lot. And again, like I feel like the 7 episodes prior to the finale do a really good job of building her and Peacemaker's rapport to the point that I buy that end scene. It's just them being so at odds throughout the rest of that episode and not really resolving it at all feels weird.
Yeah, you articulated it better for me, Nick. Like, they do have plenty of tender scenes throughout the early portion of the show. It's just that last bit that feels kind of weird, where it's like he starts off that finale episode kind of hating her guts. And
Mhm.
then,
And like
like-
obviously again, him being a big overgrown child, it's not that he actually hates her. It's just that he feels betrayed because he opened up to her and he doesn't know how to express that in a healthy way. But that's still something that the episode should have done more to get us back from, I think.
to speak to some of the other, I guess, more superficial stuff, the intro's freaking weird and awesome, and I love it, and I never skip it.
Yeah.
I like the song. I don't find it like funny. The only part of that I find actually funny is watching Vigilante do it. I think it's because like he's a mask on, I can't see his face, and something about that is so funny to me. But in general, I don't know what it is. I just look at the intro and there's never an urge to laugh. I just have the straightest face. I'm just like, the song is good, but this is goofy in a way that I don't get it.
What are you gonna do? We can't help it if your heart's dead, Bryanna.
Honestly, I'm full Shane Dawson, no soul.
And then also, no one, like, I have not seen a director. Well, I mean, we just talked about the Batman, and the action there is pretty well directed. But aside from him, I have not seen a director do action for a comic book property this well since Raimi.
Yeah, like that's not something that I really thought about as I was watching the show, but the action is pretty impressive.
It's pretty damn good, Nick. Like, and like he does really cool like flow with the momentum of certain movement shots, like when Peacemaker gets flung around by the Karate Kid, not the Karate Kid, I don't know why I call him
Judo Master.
Yeah, Judo Master.
Oh, Cheetos guy.
Cheeto Man.
Honestly, I do call him like Cheeto guy or like Cheeto man in my head. I do that character a disservice. To all you out there who really like him, you should. He's cool. I'm so sorry.
To all you out there who have read Tails Gets Trolled, you know the significance of Cheeto Man.
But yeah, the soundtrack was also pretty killer. I enjoyed a lot of that. James Gunn's always had a really good eye for fun poppy music to accentuate scenes.
Yeah, honestly, the music choice in this show, wow, like 10 out of 10, I gotta say. Fits so well.
I have a lot of tracks that I listen to now just because they were in this show.
Mm-hmm.
And the dad was a really...
Malik, I'm gonna cut you off for one second. Just 1 second. Can we please give the biggest shout outs, like big ups to the people who did the subtitles for his dad's like clan members.
Yeah,
please, God
yeah,
bless them. You are so funny. You are so funny. Okay.
You got to fill me in because I don't watch the subtitles.
The subtitles.
Oh my God! Just pull up the post.
I can't find it, but like, what was
Damn.
the
White
subtitle?
Hood Wanker.
Yeah, White Hood Wanker is what one of the subtitles said.
When one of the clansmen was talking.
Another one was just like racist ass hat or something.
Like the people who did the subs were like,
No,
absolutely fuck these people.
no holds barred
Uh-huh.
at all.
We don't like racism. We're just going to use this show to tell people what they already know. Racism is bad. Don't do it.
They really said it. Like, just look up the if you're not gonna like go back and watch the actual show, just look up the screen caps for like the subtitles of that episode. I swear they're so funny.
And like the choice to go all out and just be like, no, the villains of our show, and like the butterflies can be sympathetic at least, but like our capital V, like evil, despicable villains
Are just terrible people.
are straight up clan members. Like, again, I feel like only James Gunn would have the balls to just do that in the text of his show.
Mm-hmm.
And like,
Nick, sorry to cut you off, buddy, but
No,
to
don't
speak to that, it's been a long time since I've ever seen something so inherently disturbing in just like a naked neo-Nazi with a white hood. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I was like, this is the weird, like all fever dreams are weird, but this is the extra weird kind of fever dream feeling where like I'm looking at the television and I feel like I'm not even really here anymore.
it doesn't get any weirder than that.
Right. And she does not put clothes back on. She just stays like that. Every
She
time she's on
stays
screen, I'm like,
naked, just
Ma,
wearing
you
a
don't
white
like
hood.
you don't like put some pants on? You're not cold? Like, really?
Yeesh. But yeah, like the choice to take a character who is already like been sort of seen as the bad guy and a very like love to hate character as Peacemaker from the movie and be like, this is the guy who by comparison is kind of a benign bigot in that he's mainly just operating completely out of ignorance and he just doesn't know any better. Here's where that comes from and the kind of influence that creates that. And that is rooted in deeply, deeply hate filled, just baselessly superior attitude. And it's like, God, when he shoots his dad in the forehead, it's like, yes, thank you. Like, no waffling around.
Right. Like
Just
he was
fuck-
shaking and I was like, if he doesn't do it, I will go through the screen and do it myself. There is no reason. And I don't mean that because I dislike him. I mean there is no reason for this man to continue being alive in the context of this show. Kill him right now. He doesn't need to be here.
This is true, and they realize that. But the and Cena plays that scene so well, and then we have Vigilante come in and undercut that scene. It's like, it's that thing you're doing with your face, like.
It's a callback to when he, because I don't even think Bryanna saw the first scene where he was crying, and Vigilante's like, "Are you crying?" It's like, "No, I'm doing my facial exercises."
That's where that's from?
Yes,
Oh my god.
full
Because
circle.
they mentioned the facial exercises so many times after them. Like, what are you talking about? God.
And like the fact that once it's explained to Vigilante that he's crying, he's just like, "Oh, there, pat, pat."
Vigilante's literally like Vigilante's Peacemaker, but like nicer. Like, well, I'm gonna shoot them. Like, no, if we're not gonna shoot them, you have to tie them up with something soft. Like, you can't just like leave them here in like handcuffs. It's too rough.
The
He
Vigilante,
says duct tape.
Duct tape.
Vigilante is Peacemaker with like zero of the insecurity, zero of the like need to put on a facade.
He has no emotional ties. He has no, like, as far as we know, super tragic backstory that informs his decisions. He is a person who kills people. He is very happy with that. He has a best friend who also kills people, and all the people he knows also kill people. He has no reason to think that he should ever reform his character. He's very comfortable where he's at.
And like he has reason to believe that Peacemaker enjoys killing people. By the end of the show, he's the only one who actually like gets a kick out of the act of killing.
Mm-hmm.
But like he has no reason to like think about that.
Even if he did, I don't think he'd be stressed about it. It's like, even if the others weren't all gung-ho about it, short of them quitting their jobs, they're still going to be on the same team doing the same things, just committing murders at a very, very fast pace. So even if they didn't like it, that's not for him to worry about. So if you don't like it, quit your job. I'm vibing. I'm having fun.
I'm going to award funniest scene to him which is in the prison when he scrolls up on all the racist neo-Nazis and laughs with them as he's sitting down.
Oh my god.
And then proceeds to roast them and talks about how one of them fucked his cousin.
Sister. The
Her
sister.
sister, yeah.
My babyest baby boy who will never do anything wrong.
I was crying laughing. I had to pause and collect myself.
I love the
because it
scene
was
in
just that funny.
what it was Vigilante, right? Where he was tied to the chair and someone was threatening Peacemaker and he was like, I'm gonna take his like finger off or something. He was like, why me? Why are you doing this to me? Oh, you poor boy.
Yeah.
Not in getting his mask off and he's like, I'm gonna cycle through all these facial expressions so that you
You
can't
can't
see
identify.
what my face
You
is."
can't identify me in a lineup.
What an idiot.
I think I don't know if you remember this joke, Bryanna, but I literally thought this as I was midway through the show. Like, why is it? I might be sexist because why is it that I despise Kate Bishop in Hawkeye for being an idiotic character, but I love Vigilante so much?
No, because me too. I haven't finished Hawkeye yet, but me and Nick were watching it, and I feel like we're at least 3 episodes in, and the entire way through all 3 of these episodes, I kept stopping the show. I kept pausing the show to turn to Nick and go, "Why is this child so stupid? Why is she so dumb? I can't stand her. She's so pretty, but why is she so stupid?"
Well, I mean, I think Vigilante benefits from being in a more heightened show than Hawkeye is, where
That's
like
true.
it's more believable immediately that someone has his brand of idiocy.
Mm-hmm. Because some of the characters do have his brand of it. I feel like Cheeto Man is just like this guy, but more serious.
I'll
Killing people, eating his Cheetos, having a good time.
You're gonna make me call.
We're gonna talk about the Justice League showing up.
Go
I love
fuck
that.
another fish, asshole.
I was dying.
I love that callback. I couldn't believe he got
Right.
the 2 of them to come in and do a little cameo. That was awesome.
I love that none of them say anything. They just watch them walk away. They're just like, hello?
I guess we really did miss all the action. Like we can't even say anything. Like we're late. Goddamn.
Do we just go home?
Maybe we should call up Pattinson's Batman since our universe's Batman is MIA.
Crying.
I did not expect this show to get like global stakes, and I'm surprised that once that happened, it felt totally like earned and natural. Like the stakes in this show are higher than the Suicide Squad, the movie.
I felt like it was normal just because my first introduction to Peacemaker was, giant starfish monster. So I was like, yeah, I feel like his life is just like that. Like if I'm watching a show and it follows this guy, I will probably run into more BS like this.
Yeah, it's just like we go from a country basically being at stake in that movie to the whole planet immediately in this one.
Okay, well, I mean, the country would have been the start, but like it would have the thing would have just taken over the world. The world was still like in mortal danger.
Yeah, that's true.
This is a thing that I neglected to mention when we talked about Batman, but I was really impressed that didn't at all feel like COVID affected the production of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have that with No Way Home. There's sections of No Way Home where I'm like, oh yeah, they shot this like this because there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
And there's all of maybe 2 or 3 scenes in the whole show that feel like that. But for the most part, this also feels like a show that was not impacted during COVID, even though it was shot in the middle of COVID.
And I feel bad to do this, but we've now way gone over my allotted time. And not going to lie, even without that, I feel bad, but I'm kind of like struggling for things to talk about with this show. I feel like I kind of got all my thoughts out when I did that short video. So I am going to dip. And if you two want to continue this without
I
me.
got plans. I got to go do stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, we can just end it, Nick. This was a great discussion. I very much enjoyed this. And
Good job, everybody.
Yeah. Teamwork makes the dream work. Here's hoping that everyone enjoyed listening to us talk about these things.
For a very long time.
Yeah,
And hearing me, I know whoever's listening to this is just like, what is this girl eating? I have been munching on things like a bunny for this whole conversation, and I'm not sorry. I was hungry.